all here. You should now have a message on your screen to tell you that this session is being recorded. So you need to say that you're happy with that, and then you can clear your screen of that. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today for the third session, the 12th session GeogLive this year. It's the third one this academic year. I hope you all had a great Christmas holiday, if you can still remember it, and that your new year has started well. My name is Julia Tanner. I'm a member of the Early Years and Primary Committee of the Geographical Association, and I work with the rest of the GeogLive team who are all here today to bring you GeogLive once every half term, usually a Wednesday 3 weeks into after half term or the holiday. So it's lovely to see so many of you here today. Thank you, Anthony. So as I've already said, we will be recording this session, and it will be posted on YouTube today or within the next couple of days. All our previous recordings are there. They're available for you to use whenever you want. So please do go and explore what's there if this is your first time at GeogLive. We would like to ask you please to keep your cameras off and to mute until we get to the question and answer session, when of course you're very welcome to put those things back on. In the meantime, please do use the chat. I'm sure you're all familiar with the chat function on Zoom. You can ask questions, you can make suggestions, you can make comments, or anything else you would like to say. So please do let us know if you want to any information or you want to tell us anything. You can see that we have a Twitter account that was just on the screen. Anthony, would you mind going back to the Twitter account for a moment? Thank you. So do tweet us, and that is where you will find notifications about our sessions, the next one of which is on the 8th of March. Okay, Anthony, if you could move on, thank you. So this is just a reminder. I'm sure you're all aware that this is a free session. It's provided through the Early Years and Primary Committee of the Geographical Association. Everybody who's here today is sharing their ideas and work with you freely, but we would like you to acknowledge it as our work if you use it in any other context or if you use it with other groups. We'd be grateful if you would acknowledge GeogLive and us as individuals. So please do use the material if you acknowledge the source. We make these sessions because we want to spread the word about how fantastic primary geography can be and support teachers and schools in providing fantastic geographical learning experiences for their pupils. But the copyright of what we do today, as with all our sessions, does reside with us and with the individual contributors. Okay, thank you, Anthony. So this is our agenda for today. As I said, my name's Julia Tanner. I'm chairing this session, and I'm also doing part of it tonight, which I'm very thrilled about. So now I'm just going to run through what's going to happen in the session. Then I'll be passing over to Tessa, who's going to talk about the primary geography, the current edition of primary geography. It's just literally coming off the press as we speak. So I'm going to be, as you know, today's session is all about using picture, story and fiction books in geography. So I'm going to talk about why we should do that, what the benefit of doing that is. And Jane is going to suggest some strategies for using that. You'll find that we both refer to ideas in this book, which is the Everyday Guide to Primary Geography story, which we wrote together 10 years ago now, astonishingly. So we're starting the session, and then I'm thrilled to say that we've got a number of colleagues who are making recommendations for particular books. You can see there we've got a list of them: Sharon Witt, Kate Broadrib, Paula Owens, Jeremy Krause, Sophie Brack, and Sophie has also put together an absolutely fantastic calendar with lots of ideas on it for books that you might like to use. I'm pleased to say that John, a member of staff of the GA, has joined us today. He will be talking about how the GA can support you in school. And of course, there's plenty, well, there probably isn't plenty of time, but there's some time to use the chat and to share and network and to ask questions. So I think we'll move on from there to Tess. Tess is the new chair of the Primary Geography Committee, and this is her first time doing this. So welcome, Tess.
It is. Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for that introduction. I'm very honoured and excited to have taken over the chair of the PG, Primary Geography Journal Editorial Board. And I've taken it over from someone who you will recognise here, Steve Rawlinson, who has very, very large shoes to fill, but I'm doing my best to do that. And I'd just like to take this opportunity publicly to thank Steve for all that he's done, contributed to GeogLive, but to PG. And I know that comes from all of us on the board and all of us from a wider, from the whole primary geography community. So thank you, Steve, so much for all you've done for your years as chair on the PG editorial board. So it remains for me to, I'm really excited that we've got a fantastic edition that's coming up, which is all about natural geographies. And I think a theme that is really significant at this time of real concern about our connection to the natural world, and also the issues around climate change, biodiversity loss, and all sorts of things like that. And we know that there are children suffering from eco-anxiety and from concerns about this. So we're hoping to address that in a really joyful way, a celebration of our natural world, and giving some ideas about how we can engage children with nature in a positive way and in a hopeful but realistic way as well. So the editors, Paula Owens, who's here, well, all of us are here actually, Paula Owens, Sharon Witt, Steve Rawlinson and myself, all edited it. And we're really looking forward to the publication, which is imminent, just as Julia has said, and it should be dropping through your real and virtual letterboxes really very soon, and will obviously be available on the GA website, as all backdated copies are up to 2005. So an absolute host of ideas and fantastic research and practitioner writing, which is something that the journal is really proud of having, that you are all involved in. So there's some great highlights in this one, as you can see there. Articles around engaging with nature, eco capabilities, nature through children's eyes. So the whole children's geographies agenda is really important that we've got there. Interpreting landscapes, deepening knowledge. And we're really thrilled to have our interview with Jackie Morris, whose name you may recognise. She's collaborated a lot with Robert McFarlane, particularly on the work Lost Words, which you may well have come across and hopefully be using in school. Absolutely fantastic. And you'll recognise, I hope, this our cover, which is one of Jackie's illustrations. So we're absolutely delighted to have that as our cover this year. And there are lots and lots of ideas about using the cover inside the edition, as well as all the ideas in the start gallery and articles in the using articles in the PG in practice section. So we hope that this is, well, we're very confident that this is a fantastic edition, which is on its way, and which I know that you'll get lots from. Please do, we love to have feedback. I'll put my email address in the chat for any feedback about the journal, any ideas, anything of that sort. You're the people who make the journal. We really want to hear from you, and we want to constantly developing it and working on it. So please do get in touch. And I think on that note, Julia, I think that's it. I know we've got a host of things to get through today, so I will hand over back to you.
Thank you, Tess, and welcome very much to your new role. And I'm sure we all echo everything you said about Steve and the fantastic contribution he's made, not only as chair of the editorial board of PG, but in many other ways for such a long time, and is still making. We couldn't do without him. So thank you, Steve.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's move on. So our topic today is geography through story, picture and fiction books. It's something I'm absolutely passionate about. I've been excitedly telling lots of people about this session today because I'm so pleased to be doing it. Next slide, please, Anthony. And why am I so excited about using story in geography? Well, one of the great things that I always found in school, and still do because I still work in school these days, is that they are engaging and accessible for all pupils, and particularly those with limited literacy skills. and they can support such a wide range of learning. So this book that I've chosen to illustrate this point is an absolutely fabulous book set in Wombat Flat, which is in New South Wales in Australia. And it's about a family holiday in this place. It's almost wordless, not entirely almost wordless, not entirely so. What it has is these incredibly detailed pictures. You get a flavour of it from the front cover, pretty much in the style of Where's Wally. There's lots and lots of detail to be looked at. And children I've seen of all ages absolutely poring over this book, looking for the detail, partly because along the bottom strip of each page, there are tiny little snippets of the big picture. So you can spend a lot of time trying to find the individual incidents or places or events illustrated along the bottom in the main picture. And another great thing about this book is those strips are seen or drawn from different perspectives, adult perspectives and different children's perspectives. So what you get is different people's perspectives on the same place and the different affordances that this place has for people of different interests and ability. And right at the end, it's got a fabulous sketch map, which would be a great stimulus for some sketch maps, drawing a sketch map of somewhere that you might visit yourself. Thank you, Anthony. If we could move on. Okay, so high quality text, well, they can bring to life places and characters and events. And that's a very nice image I've got there, some children poring over a book. So every book is set somewhere. Some books are set in imaginary places, but every book has got some sort of a setting which you can investigate, talk about with your children. In many books, there are many children's books involve characters who face dilemmas, who face challenges that they have to overcome. And many books are set in situations which are very true to life and which children will recognize. For example, one of the books I'm going to talk about later on is called The Last Bear, which is set in the Arctic, and it's about global warming and the impact on wildlife in the Arctic. An absolutely brilliant book by a brilliant new author. Okay, thank you, Anthony. And this is another book that I've only just discovered, which is absolutely fantastic. I'd recommend this to all of you. Thomas Harding is actually a journalist. His family has origins in Germany, near Berlin. And this is the story of the house that his great-grandfather built in the interwar period. And this story just offers so much opportunity to explore what happened to that house. I'll tell you very briefly what happened to the house is it was built and the family were very happy in it, but they were Jewish. They were turned out of the house. Nazis came and lived there. After the war, it talks about what happened to the house after the war, in the Cold War, the actual separation between East and West Germany, the defences were actually built adjacent to the house. Other people came and lived there, they left, the house fell into disrepair, and eventually Thomas Harding went back to look for this family home, found it derelict, and with local people has refurbished it, and it's now a centre for education and reconciliation. So it's a very powerful, true story, but it provokes so many questions. I've actually read this with a 10-year-old. So many questions about the past and what happened, and why would you want to build a wall to divide people from one another, and why did people behave as they did, and what happened to the people who had to leave. I mean, it is an absolutely fabulous book. I've only just discovered it. I really recommend it. Thank you, Anthony. Overall, when Jane and I were thinking about how you might use story, we thought these are the 4 main things that you can do with story. So as I said just now, almost all books are actually set somewhere. So they're perfect for extending locational and place knowledge in an interesting and engaging way. They can enhance knowledge of physical and human features and processes, and lots of the books we're going to be talking about this afternoon do that. I know Paula Owens is talking about a couple of books that illuminate river processes, for example. There are lots of opportunities to develop geographical skills. I know Jane is going to talk about mapping skills later on, but also there are other skills in things like inquiry and questioning and critical thinking that you can do in relation to some of the for example, environmental issues or other issues thrown up by the stories that you read. Thanks, Anthony. So I'm now going to talk about a range of reasons to use books, illustrating them with particular books. I don't know if any of you know Faith Ringgold. She's a very famous award-winning African-American artist. And this is a book that's partly based on her own childhood. It's set in Harlem in 1939, just before World War II. In fact, the States, of course, didn't come into the war until later on. And it's about what the child in it, whose name is Cassie, she's 8. Cassie thinks of the rooftop that is above their apartment building as a beach, tar beach, because obviously it's got asphalt on it. And this is a fantastic example of a book which can take children to other places. It's got such a strong sense of place through the brilliant artwork that Faith used. And this book really includes lots and lots of examples of specific locations in New York, but it also has a very strong sense of what sort of a place it is in general at that time. Many of the places depicted, you could find modern pictures to compare and contrast, see how the place has changed over time. Thank you, Anthony. And then this is another beautiful book by Michael Foreman. I'm sure many of you know Michael Foreman. Anyway, this is Mia's story. It's like a lot of the books I've chosen for today, actually based on a true story that Michael discovered when he was in Chile. This is a great book for expanding pupils' horizons and taking them somewhere that is unfamiliar to them. The book is set in a small village in Chile, at the foothills of the mountain. It's a fairly impoverished place, and it's a story of what can happen with one small change, provoked in this case by a small child, Mia. So in actual fact, this book is also about children making a difference, which earlier on Tess spoke, we know many children have eco-anxiety these days. One of the ways that we can help with that is to give them opportunities to think about what they can individually and collectively do to address some of the challenges that we all face. And this is a really excellent example of how that can happen. It's also got some really solid geography in it, comparing rural and urban settlements. There's some journeys in it, and it's about the very beginnings understanding of how trade can change places. Thank you, Anthony. Oh, and this is, many of you will know Jeannie Baker's books, absolutely fantastic, wordless collage books. This is one that it's probably my favorite of all of them. This is a book that is set in 2 places simultaneously. It's set in urban Australia, where Jeannie Baker comes from, and also in rural Morocco. And it's a book that when it opens out, you can read it in 2 ways. The pictures mirror one another, that's why it's called Mirror, and it takes you through the life of a family in an urban environment in Australia and in rural Morocco. There's absolutely stunning images of the landscapes and the places and the lifestyle in both these places. And the way the book is organized, you're constantly comparing the 2. And so it's absolutely brilliant for helping children recognize the similarities as well as the differences between places, and to help them make generalizations. Thank you, Anthony. This is a book I only read at the weekend. I absolutely loved it. It's Hannah Gold's first book. It's won an award. I'm not at all surprised. It's absolutely fabulous. It's about a small girl called April who's rather sad. Her mother has died and her father is, well, really drowning in his own grief, and together they go to the Arctic because he's a scientist and he's sent there to do some work, and she's on an island that's called Bear Island, but the last bears went a long time ago, she's told, but in actual fact she does find that there is a single remaining bear left, and as you can see, she and the bear develop a relationship, and this is the story of how she manages to save the bear. Like many children's books, this has got some elements of fantasy in it, which in the appendix Hannah Gold does talk about. But the main theme of caring for nature, caring for the environment, taking responsibility and doing something is very, very strong in this book. Thank you, Anthony. And again, this is another book that I'm sure many of you will know. This is absolutely brilliant for helping children understand something about the world population by imagining the world as a village of 100 people. So it's got lots of information about different aspects of population, and it's about the inequality in the distribution of resources. There's an article in Primary Geography by Ben Ballon. I couldn't find the actual date of it, but there's an article by him about how you can use this book in Key Stage 2. Thank you, Anthony. And this is another book. This is one of a series of 5 books that were originally produced in conjunction with the BBC, and all of them are available on YouTube. So if you wanted to look at the YouTube, you can do. It's 5 stories of different refugee children, all true. This one is told in Ali's own words. If you look at it on YouTube, they've got the text and the pictures together. So what you can, and it's all his own words. And Ali is a 10-year-old who had to leave Afghanistan because of the war, and who traveled to England and had to come without his parents because they could not get the right paperwork. So this book is really a story of hope and how new lives can be created out of terrible circumstances. Thank you, Anthony. And again, this is Michael Morpurgo. Many of you will know Michael Morpurgo's work. It's absolutely wonderful stories that he writes. This one is one that I like because it really helps children to understand the different viewpoints of 2 people who find themselves on an island. One is a child who's on a round the world trip, Michael, who unfortunately falls off his boat and with his dog ends up on what he thinks is a deserted island. And he and the dog imagine that they will die because they don't know how to survive in this place. And then somebody brings them gifts of food and water, and they don't know where these gifts are coming from. And then eventually they discover that there is another person on the island. And this is a great book for thinking about how we communicate with other people, different viewpoints. The person that they meet on the island, and who's called Kensuke, that's why the book's called that, and Michael have bring very different perspectives to the dilemma they find themselves in. And it's also about how we survive, how we meet our needs, what our wants and what's our needs. It's full of opportunities for all sorts of quite deep discussion. Thank you, Anthony. And then this final one, One Plastic Bag. Again, it's another story based on a true event of women who tackled a problem in their village, plastic rubbish, and turned it into an opportunity. So this is a great book for thinking about how we can take action to deal with real life social and economic injustices. Thank you, Anthony. And just to finish and to pass over to Jane, this is a place that I'm sure you'll all recognise. This is 100 Acre Wood from the Winnie the Pooh books, and many children's books have opportunities for mapping. Some of them have maps in them, but many of them lend themselves to mapping. So I'd recommend that. So I'm going to hand over to Jane. I'm absolutely thrilled Jane is with us today. Thank you, Jane, so much for joining us. As you can see,
thank you for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled that you're here. As you can see, Jane is principal of an international school in Monza, and I'm absolutely thrilled that she's joined us today. And I'm going to hand over to you now, Jane, to talk about how to use books. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Hello, GeogLive. So there are so many strategies to talk about. I'm going to try and share my slides and share a favorite strategy on each of the slides. At the bottom of every slide, you're going to find a link to a primary geography article, and this can give you further information. So the article either speaks to the general theme of the slide, or it gives examples of the strategy I'm going to explain this evening. So off we go. Thank you, Anthony. So thinking first towards picture books, visual literacy is a skill that we all, of course, want our pupils to develop. That idea that images can be read, that images communicate so much information and ideas. And here are some examples of ways that some provocations that you could use with your pupils. So making observations, questioning, and making deductions about the images the children can see in the book. There's also a hyperlink here to some question prompts or some prompt ideas for talking back to the book. So where you ask your pupils to have a conversation with the book, with the picture. So, do you know, Image? I'm noticing that. So they can really start to verbalize their thinking and how they're reading the images. Or, do you know, book? This reminds me of. So they start to have that conversation. A strategy you'll find in our everyday guide to primary geography story. It's one of Julia's pièce de résistance and one of my favorites, the strategy of put yourself in the picture. So the children can draw themselves on a post-it, as it explains in the book. They can use a Lego block with their face on. They could use a small world toy. And what we want them to do is to jump into the picture and really explore it. Use the see, think, wonder routine. How are the children feeling? They could even write speech bubbles about what they would say if they were in that space. Does it remind them of somewhere they've been before? A perfect book to use for this is, of course, Flotsam by David Weissner, one of my favorite pictures from the book. And there's lots of questions that you could put out for the pupils to think about. So if we went inside one of these houses, what would it look like? Could we make a map of what the house would look like? Would you like to move from place to place like the turtles are doing? We can also use the images and the pictures inside books for a specific concept. So one way to do this is could be to ask the pupils to look for clues in the picture of physical geography, for example. And this is a great pre-assessment tool because you can look at what the children have found as clues to give you an idea of their initial understanding of what we mean by physical geography in this example. And to really think about, when we're looking at the images, what prior knowledge do the children have? What are they drawing on to reach these ideas and these conclusions? A favorite strategy for this is to give the children either a small bit of the middle of an image from the book or half the image, and using the pupils' knowledge of the place in the book so far, from what they've heard or what they've seen in the book, you can ask them to complete the image. Pupils, boys and girls, what would be to the left, right, in the foreground, in the background? And then if you ask them, that's interesting, can you tell me more? It really gives them a chance to delve into why they think the place is like it is. And I know that we all know as geography teachers the danger of the single story, but I just wanted to pop it up there to remind us. Books, of course, as Julia already mentioned in her slides, they do tell us a lot about places, and they give us such a beautiful opportunity to ask so many questions about how children feel in a place or what it might be like to live there. And then maybe the children can also think about how does it connect to other places that they've seen in other books or places they've visited. Some of you might be fortunate to have a book that has actual photos or images from your local area. So asking the children to reflect, has it captured the essence of the place? Does it show our place well? And this is a perfect opportunity when thinking about places in books to use the Harvard visual thinking routine, think, puzzle, explore. So what are the children puzzled about? What are their questions about this place from studying and analyzing the pictures? And what would they like to explore further? And to really get that sense of place attachment, obviously all drama strategies are a perfect opportunity to really think about places and spaces in a dramatic way. Here's just a list of some of our favorites. So the children can freeze, either as the character or in the book, or maybe they could be a feature in the book, for example, a tree or the bear, for example. And then the teacher walks around and taps each pupil on the shoulder and they come to life. How would they move as that feature or that character? What sorts of things would they be saying? And this really helps the children to gain that sense of place. There's so much geographical language that can come out of books. And by that, I mean, it really does, when you're looking at books, help the pupils to learn about language. So what geographical features are in the book? How has the author named these? Have they used the technical term? Have they used something metaphorical or figurative to describe the feature? And then the children can also learn through language, because at this point we really want to start to have them explain their thinking and use some of the language from the books. So for example, naming and noticing features in the books. Can they, for example, go out into their locality? Can you take a field walk? Can we name and notice some of the features in the book that are here in our local area? Could we also explore the culture that comes through the book? Is this a moment? Oh, wow, the author is talking a lot about lava. What is lava? Maybe we need to go to our non-fiction books to help us, for instance. So making that cross-reference between the two genres. It's a beautiful moment. I'm sorry that we haven't got time to do it today, but for the children to close their eyes and listen to you reading a passage from a book, and then read it again to them slowly and ask them to draw what they hear. Then when they open their eyes, and they do their drawing, we'd really like them to reflect on, okay, in your drawing, what was the language that came from the book that made you draw in this specific way? Thank you. I love using books to help children understand the perspective from the author or the illustrator. So it's a beautiful moment when you're opening a book to really think about how has the author through their words or the illustrators through their images created that sense of place. And then to really, with our Key Stage 2 students, pupils, think about the characters. So would that character be the same in a different place? What if we took, I don't know, I'm trying to think of one, Cinderella, and we put her in the middle of a jungle? Would she behave in the same way? How are the characters connected to the place? How does the story move? What is the structure of the narrative? If you have time and you're feeling creative, what about covering the front cover with brown paper or wrapping paper? And then when you get to the end of the inquiry with the book, the children can show their understanding of what they've understood about the places and the spaces and try to create their own front cover and compare that to the actual cover. This is quite a tricky strategy to explain super quickly, but another way to understand the point of view of the authors or illustrators could be asking children to put on concept glasses. For example, I would like us all to think about the concept of perspective. So we're going to put on our perspective concept glasses. Are they all on nicely? Good job. And I want us to think about, okay, what perspective, what do we learn about this place on this page? Is it the same on the next page? You could also give children different types of concept glasses, for example, time, place, and space, change, and see how they view the story through different concept glasses. I think we could probably have, oh my gosh, I've got 30 seconds. We can have a whole session on map work, for example, but beginning with the very basics of studying and analysing and inquiring into story maps that are already in books. It's a perfect opportunity to think about legends. How is the story born out of the place? And this is a feature that I've been playing with these days called Odd Feature Out. So either you as the teacher or even better, the pupils can make a story map, but leaving out one critical feature, one important thing from the map. And the children have to critically look at the map. They have to analyze it to work out what feature is missing that should be part of that story map. There are so many creative things that we can do with books. I know we have some super creative people on the screen today, but for example, story sacks and sensory stories, they're so important to bring places to life. Here's some work on giant paper to really give the chance for those children to see, wow, these characters can be big, and to use paper and really just go wild on the page. The strategy for this one is one that Anthony, Ruth, and I love. It's completely turning the classroom upside down. I chose to show it in pictures, So this is my classroom in a complete mess, but it's actually representing No Such Thing as Nessie by Chani McBain. And as the teacher, it's very easy to think, don't touch that. Oh no, the classroom is a complete mess. We're never going to put it back together. However, don't panic. Just listen to how the children are trying to find everyday objects to represent natural things. Here you can see that the shells are underneath the blue because the children knew that the shells weren't floating on top of the lake. And then that whole discussion about what are shortbread biscuits, because we don't really have them here in Italy, and how could we represent them? And finally, just because we've completely run out of time, sorry, Julia, really just reminding us of those golden moments, that it really is so important to leave that time for children to leaf through a book or to wander and wonder. Not every book has to have an objective. I know I shouldn't say that, but just really reminding us that the joy and the beauty that we can get from books is so exciting. So thank you for listening, and I will hand back to Julia.
Thank you, Jane. That's absolutely wonderful, full of ideas. I'm sure everybody's taken away lots from that. And as you say, time is short, so we're moving on. Sharon, I think this is your book, isn't it? It sounds fabulous.
Okay, so I'm going to just explain and share this book, which is one of my recent favourites, published in 2022, so relatively new. So are you ready for a wonder walk? Could you and your class be wonder walkers? So this is a fantastic book which can be used as a stimulus for some geographical fieldwork. Yesterday, I used this in Loughborough, and we walked with Year 1 children. We wandered and we wondered, and we spotted shards of cracked ice and glistening snow crystals and mistletoe with white berries nesting in winter branches and bird tracks in the snow. So this is a book that will let your children's imagination soar and their curiosity run wild as they look at the world differently. And it places children at the heart of your work and values children's questions with the world. So Misha Archer has some wonderful collages. You can see one of them here in the picture, and they cover a range of landscapes and environments, fields and forests and mountains and beaches and oceans. And it shares provocations and speculative geographical questions from the children. And this speculative thinking and imagining is so important in these times of crises, these times of climate crises and global crises, because it's so important that the children are enabled to think about the world differently, to imagine a different kind of world. So it just gives you a flavour of the questions. Another question that they come up with: are rivers the Earth's veins? Is the wind the world breathing? They're just wonderful questions. So this could be read before a local walk. On their return, the children could perhaps be asked to think about their own questions or create collage pages of something that they wondered about or they spotted or drew their attention. And it's a lovely opportunity, to perhaps make a class display. We are Wonder Walkers. So I can highly recommend Wonder Walkers by Misha Archer. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That is fabulous. I'm going to rush on to the library tomorrow, see if I can get it. And if I can hand over to Kate now. Kate, this is your first time with us. We're delighted to have you joining us. And now's your 2-minute slot.
Thank you very much. This is one of the best books I've come across in my 20 years of teaching. And as Julia has already said tonight, these wordless books, they open up a world of geography to our youngsters. They stimulate interest in surroundings, and this one can even provoke, hopefully, some action with their parents. Next slide, please, Anthony. Thank you. So, an overview of Hike, written actually by an illustrator. He actually worked on the Angry Birds film, but it sees a father and a child. They wake up in the morning. There's been lots of planning in the bedroom as they're going to drive into the mountains and take this hike. there's a map, there's a tree sapling, all sorts of things. They've got their hiking boots. What's really, really lovely about this book, though, is it takes in physical and human features on the journey, and the lovely story of the family. They plant this tree, and at the very back of the book, you see this has been a tradition for 4 generations. So a little bit of environmental action taking place there. Next slide, please. The human environment begins on the first double page. The family live in a bungalow. So instead of the usual publishing information, it's a double page spread. You can see some of the city behind it. So they drive past the shops, there are skyscrapers. Wonderful to have a discussion about what's the difference between a village, a town, a city. You notice obviously shops, businesses. So you can bring in some of the rich geographical language. Next slide, please. The physical, thank you. The physical environment, though, is my favourite. The author actually is from Utah. So it's based around places like Fish Lake, Forest, Zion National Park, which I have to confess, to being a secondary geography teacher for 20 years, I've had the pleasure to go to. So I've put some photographs which actually perhaps represent the real environment here. But everything is covered. The beautiful steep-sided valleys, the summit peak with the eagles soaring, every animal you could possibly come across as they try and they cross a fallen log as they cross the river with the waterfall behind them. It's wonderful. You can get across all the seasons and weather. It looks like it's set perhaps February, March sort of time, because there's still some snow on the ground and there's a great snowball fight scene. And he himself, the author, just suggested in an interview, this is all based on his real experiences. Next slide, please. So it's just my plug, really. I love the book so much. I wrote 6 to 7 lessons on it. I hope they'd be useful for you to take and adapt with the optional hike, and getting your children out at the end and exploring your own area. They're freely available on the Hampshire Geography site, so I'll pop the link in the chat just when I finish it, but please have a look. Next slide, please, Anthony. The planning goes from what is a hike to the geography features you would expect, so dealing with physical and human. I'm really aiming this here at Key Stage 1. Why look at Utah? Because the book's been set there, so we go over to our non-UK, non-European place, and then I look at the landscape in more detail. Bit of a chance to look at hot environments, and are they different actually to our local area? So I'm from Hampshire, so quite nice weather really down in the south compared to the north, but nowhere as the heat can get in Utah. And then it finishes with the most common feature of our local landscape. So a chance to do local area work with the children and the optional 7th lesson for field work. Next slide, please, Anthony. I've even kind of been very geeky and linked it to the national curriculum, so hopefully you'll enjoy that planning. And then I think my 2 minutes is up with the final slide. Everything's there, some photographs. I've also done about 4 or 5 pages of notes to go through and explore the geography on each image. So I hope it's of help. Please get in contact if you're interested in doing further work on it. I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. That sounds like a great book, one I've not read yet, but it's going on my list. Okay, Paula, I'm going to hand over to you now. Talk about rivers.
Thank you very much. Hello, GeogLive, and thank you very much for having me. I'm going to be sneaky and get 2 books in here talking about rivers. One is River Story by Meredith Hooper, and another one that is a beautiful complementary book is Rhythm of the Rain by Graham Baker Smith. And I think they're both really suitable for Key Stage 1 and Lower Key Stage 2. And whereas River Story really talks about the river journey, Rhythm of the Rain complements this beautifully by expanding it into a more global dimension and also bringing in the idea of the water cycle in more depth. Next slide, please, Anthony. So I've just put some extracts here from Meredith Hooper's River Story here. And you can see that, first of all, there are some beautiful illustrations that you can try out some of the activities that have been suggested. And the beautiful language as well is chock-a-block full of really useful words to name and describe parts of the river, river features, human and physical features, but also some of the processes at work as well. The language uses that beautifully. So you can talk about these different languages and help children to sequence a typical kind of river journey and help them to grasp that conceptual underpinning about rivers, well, first of all, fundamentally moving from high to low, and about where they go to and what they do. And the end of the book has got this wonderful map that you could recreate as well and talk with children and label it using this rich river vocabulary. Thank you. Next slide, please, Anthony. So if we contrast this with The Rhythm of the Rain by Graham Baker Smith, there's not so much specific vocabulary in it, but again, the illustrations are beautiful. They're almost quite dreamlike. But what I really like about this is that rather than being perhaps a provincial river that you might be able to find and identify with in a part of the UK, for example, it takes you wider, it takes you out into the global, because the young boy tips a jam jar of water into the river near its source, and then we kind of imagine it splashing and splashing its way down to the sea, but then it dissipates and evaporates, and it moves with air currents, and it lands on different shores. And we get a clue as to where that might be by looking at some of the wildlife, and then it goes somewhere else, so we get an idea of the processes involved there. And it takes us to this lovely picture of a waterfall that you can see in the bottom, that we imagine is somewhere in a country in Africa. And I think you might guess where that might possibly be. You could ask the children where they think that might be located and use atlases to find out, and think about the creatures that you find there. So it's got this really strong global dimension that spreads out beyond the local. But then the water continues its journey and comes back to the ocean again. And then eventually it comes back to the little boy's patch. And so we get that closing the cycle, if you like, and making it real and relevant. Next slide, please, Anthony. Thank you. And this is just an extract of some of the language here that you can see that describes some of the processes of the water cycle quite beautifully. And then I've just kind of rated it a little bit, thinking about how each book's worked, and they're very much evenly paced. So I think they're very good complementary versions to use, as I said, in year 2 and year 3, talking about that water cycle process. Next slide, please. And I've just finished by just thinking of some ideas. I've taken some of these pillars of progression from the national curriculum that of course all work together, and just think how we could deepen that locational knowledge. For example, if you've got Digimaps, it's got a wonderful GeogLive function that you could, for example, type in meander in a particular location near a river and find some images and think, well, can we find an image in real life that matches some of the images in the storybook? And I've put some other ideas down there as well that people can read later on. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
That is brilliant, Paula. Thank you very much. And for those people who are asking about all the things that are being recommended, the whole thing will be up on YouTube for you to look at your leisure. Jeremy, it's time to hand over to you to this, another fabulous book I didn't know until you recommended it.
Thanks, Julia. Hello, everybody. We may be online, but we're all somewhere. We're all in a place. And it's been said already, all children's literature is set in places real or imagined. So Revenge of Samuel Stokes is one of those imagined places, but it's a real place in many senses compared to where we all live now. It's a story for our time. It's where geography and history meet. The great thing about this story is it's also a ghost story, so it really gets children's imagination going. It's about the same place through time and how nothing is ever permanent. So Tim and Jane are 2 children who live at Charstock, a new housing estate built on the site of a destroyed stately home. Odd things happen. Smell of roast dinner coming from a washing machine, box hedges coming where there should be runner beans, Greek temples where they put up a greenhouse. So they realise that Charstock has been haunted. It's been haunted by the ghost of Samuel Stokes, the landscape gardener who designed the gardens of the old stately home. And I think the quote on the bottom of the slide there really summed it up, put into the mind of the child. But hundreds of years, we've had a book tonight about 100 years, but it's for hundreds of years, how places, a succession of places, all on the same bit of ground, forests, then fields, then houses, then something a bit grand and mad like Samuel Stokes's park, and then more houses and gardens. I thought I'd contextualize this next, please, Anthony. I think just the islands we live in, there are 6,000 islands in the British Isles, that's Ireland plus the United Kingdom, and 72 million people. It's chances of any one bit of our country being unchanged in some shape or form is almost nil. And I think many of us live in places subject to that change. And there are 2 useful words, and I think children will come across these in the news. This whole idea of a brownfield site, land already changed, but people, when they want new development, say, well, you must use this land first. Some of these brownfield sands are former tip heaps. Some of them are former buildings from industry. And the other word that you'll hear, the children hear, is the idea of green belt. So green is good, brown is bad, green is good. But it's mainly countryside and agriculture. And there are often protests about this land being used for housing. And I live in an area of Britain between Oxford and Cambridge, and it's called the Cambridge Arc, Oxford-Cambridge Arc, and it's suffering from a huge amount of development, much of it planned in isolation from everywhere else. And there are often protests. And I think this is a very useful way of getting children engaged in a debate about the future of our country. Anyway, there's an example, and I thought you'd like to have an example that links to a real place. This is a place in Leeds, and if you watch The Great British Sewing Bee, that is where it's filmed. It's the Sunnybank Mills in Farsley. And Farsley was a mill town, or a mill village, and it was in operation as a mill town between 1829 and 2008. And it was run by the Gaunt family. So you have three images there, which come from Digimap. The image from the 1890s, the one at the current time, and then an aerial photograph. These are all available off Digimap. And even in just the two maps, you can see the change between one place and another. Now, I like the idea that children might be encouraged to want to write stories of their own relating to somewhere your school is located or a place you visit, a place that's changed massively over time, or even a small amount over time, to encourage children to possibly imagine how things might just pop up, like Samuel Stokes's park, like ghosts from the past. And maybe if you do get to watch a British Sewing Bee, you might like to imagine things popping up there from the wood mills that existed there before the building became used for its current use, creative industries, studios and shops. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's fabulous. And I see somebody, Laura, you're in Farsley. Well, I'm in Carverley, very close. I go to Farsley on a very regular basis. It's lovely to have somewhere local mentioned. Okay, moving on. Sophie, your turn. Are you there, Sophie?
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be talking to you today about a book called The Girl Who Wrote the Ocean by Alistair Humphreys. This book has been quite recently published. It was published last year in about the summertime. It's inspired by Alistair Humphreys' own experiences rowing the Atlantic Ocean. It follows the adventures of a girl, Lucy, as she takes on a solo 3,000-mile journey across the Atlantic Ocean alone in her rowing boat. And one of the reasons I think this is such a brilliant book is because in between each chapter are both diary entries from Lucy documenting her experiences, and then there are also homeworks from Lucy's classmates which give countless learning opportunities to link across the primary curriculum. There's no way I can possibly talk about all of them, so I'll just talk about a few of them. Now, it does say that she travels 3,000 miles, and we know that Lucy's destination is Barbados in the Caribbean, but I spoke to the author, and where she started is a bit ambiguous. He doesn't actually tell us in the book where he starts. Yes, I was going to mention this. Alistair does offer free copies to school, but also if someone buys a copy, so like if a pupil bought a copy, they then also have an offer on that as well, so it's worth looking into. Next slide, please. So on page 94 is a piece of homework titled Solar Power. So the homework is like a whole non-fiction, child-friendly written thing about this. And therefore, if you got to that part of the text, this would have a great opportunity to link with learning about sources of electricity, renewable and non-renewable energy sources. And I've just bulleted pointed some different ideas of where you might go with that. So you could classify the energy sources into renewable and non-renewable. Children could learn about the pros and cons of different energy sources. I've just linked to this book called The UK in Maps, which is a fantastic collection of maps, because on page 30 and 31, you can find information about where the UK gets its energy from, and some great extra information to explore with the children. You could find and locate the UK's solar farms. So I've just put a few of the largest solar farms down there. You might have some which are near you. It might be that you begin to look at how to save or conserve the use of energy and the use of electricity, or you might want to look at solar power in the context of creating a solar oven and seeing how that solar power can create heat. Next slide, please. On page 218 is a piece of homework entitled The Plastic Problem. And we can all see how that can link across our curriculum because it's such a topical thing to talk about at the moment. So again, I've just linked to some ideas which are out there. So the first one, Kids Against Plastic, is a great website which will share some child-friendly, mind-boggling statistics about plastic pollution and puts it across in a child-friendly format. Children could learn about how long it takes different types of rubbish to decompose. The World Wildlife Foundation has also produced some great resources which you could link in here. You could organise a litter pick in your local area or surround your school. You could then maybe use a digital mapping service such as Digimaps to map the location of plastic waste and do some field work related to that. Or you could consider the amount of plastic waste that we produce as individuals by doing a survey of plastic waste from lunchboxes or the fridge at home or anything like that. So you can then begin to think about how we might reduce our own plastic waste. Next slide, please. On page 224 is a piece of homework entitled Overfishing. I thought this would be, if you were reading this book in the summer, you might then link this to World Ocean Day, which is on the 8th of June 2023. There is a whole engaging unit of work you could link in here from a county edit called Sustainable Fisheries, which is available for free. So you could take some of those links and adapt there. It is available on TES. And you can begin to get the children to understand the finite natural resources. So you could begin to think about issues surrounding overconsumption of national resources coming in here as well. Next slide, please. Now here, I have just listed the titles of all of the other homeworks which are in this book. As you can see, there's no way I can possibly explore all of them, but it kind of shows you how brilliant this book is. I mean, there's one on food webs, great link to science there, phases of the moon, communication at sea, you can bring in navigation, you can bring in mapping there. You've got ocean explorers, the Atlantic Ocean and oceans. There's just, you've got hurricanes at the bottom. There's just so much opportunity in this text. Now, Alistair has created a web page, which is intended to be a resources hub for any resources or worksheets that teachers create for the topic. You can find that on the link. So if you are going to use this book or you create any worksheets or come up with any teaching ideas, send them to him. He will load them up to the website and hopefully that's going to become a really rich page. If you're reading this story to your class or having it as a class novel, he is willing to answer questions. So if you email them to the email that is on there, atlanticlucy@gmail.com, Lucy will pass them on to Alistair and he will answer via YouTube. He's also provided photos from his own adventure rowing the ocean, and these are free to use for your classroom. So the photo on my background slide is actually him on his own adventure in 2012. So there's loads of opportunity from those photos with your class as well. Well, that's everything. So that is everything about the book. I massively recommend it. It's a great class story. Do go and explore because there's so much opportunity. Finally, we have shared so many books today, so we have created a handout, which if you scan the QR code, you should be able to download to your phones. It will summarise the books we have discussed in today's webinar, but there are also some other examples in there of great text to inspire geography in your classrooms that we have just not had time to talk about today, because we could have spoken for hours on this matter and we had to narrow it down. So do download, do scan, do download the PDF. I will place it on Twitter as well after the webinar has finished, and we hope it will be useful for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. That sounds like a fabulous book. I'm going to add it to my list. John, I'm conscious of the time. Could I ask you if you could very quickly introduce some of the resources that people might like to be aware of from the GA before I close the session? Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So just very quickly recapping what Tessa said at the beginning. If you're a GA member, then you get access to the whole archive of the different articles and the different editions of PG back through the years. Anthony? We obviously develop bespoke consultancy where people like myself and others who have been on this call today will actually visit your school and develop your curriculum alongside you. We'll go again, Anthony. Yep. And we also provide CPD more online than actually us visiting. We have a number of consultants that offer that as well, including ones such as this course that's mentioned here, where Nell looks at the literacy and numeracy attached, and that can be run through geography and geography through literacy and numeracy. Again, Anthony, thanks. Obviously, Julia mentioned the primary geography story everyday guide, but that's one of a range of everyday guides that we have available in our shop. Is that the last one? No, and we support sort of more general development of geography in your school through various school-led CPD. And Julia and Paul have both been part of today's session and developed some of these on our behalf. I think there might be one more, is there? And in the same way, the In the Know, which is more of the sort of substantive knowledge that would back up these different units of work that you might create around energy or earthquakes and tsunamis or rivers and water cycles that have just been mentioned. That is almost definitely the last one. Oh no, it's another one. Sorry. Yeah, and this is about just resourcing more generally, leading primary geography. You know, Tessa that opened today was the editor on this, and a number of contributors have been part of it. And if I was to say one book to help you move your geography curriculum and your geography practice on, then that would be the Leading Primary Geography. I'll say again, that's the last one, and that one is. Thank you, Julia.
Right, thank you, John. I'm sorry you had to skip through that. So it's been great to have so many of you here today. I can see lots of you enjoyed it, glancing at the chat. I'm sorry we've run out of time for any questions today, but please put stuff in the chat. The GeogLive team will attempt to answer them. The next GeogLive is on the 8th of March, and our theme is Place Local to Global. And also, Anthony, I think we have a slide about GA Conference, which this year is in Sheffield. So any of you in the north of England, please do come along. It would be absolutely great to see some of you there. If you can't make it in person, you can always come to some of the sessions online. I know there are lots of great primary sessions being planned for this year. I'd like to thank everybody who came today. I hope you found it useful. We're very keen to get your feedback. Anthony has put the feedback form in the chat, so please do, if you have time, look at that. There are lots of reasons to join the GA. Some of them are on the screen in front of you. I know it's time to finish, so I'd like to thank you all very much for coming, and I'd especially like to thank all our contributors today. Jane joining us from Italy for the first time, which was lovely. To Sharon, to Kate, to Paula, to Jeremy, to Sophie, who not only presented a book, but put together that absolutely fabulous Canva document, which I know you're going to find invaluable. And also to the other members of the GeogLive team, Jen, Kate, and Steve, who do all the work behind the scenes. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm very grateful to you all, and I hope everybody has found it useful. Okay, is there anything in the chat that we need to pay attention to, that we can answer quickly? Anthony or Kate or Steve, I know you've been looking at it.
I think there's been a lot of thank you for these great ideas and people saying they're going to be buying books. Not so many questions. I think they've been answered as we've gone through. I think people are just really thrilled with all the ideas that they've been seeing.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear. So if you've enjoyed it, please do tweet about it, tell your friends, tell your colleagues. The more the merrier who come to these sessions. This session will be on YouTube within 48 hours. All our previous 11 sessions are there as well. So it's a resource that we make in the hope that people will find it useful. So please do use it and share it with your colleagues in school or in network meetings or anywhere you find the opportunity.